Oftentimes when I get brought in to investigate a breach, it's because something failed. There's some failure in security at that particular company. That said, most of the attack groups that I personally deal with are good enough that had you patched that one thing that they found, they would have found something else. Our job as security professionals are to patch the millions of vulnerabilities that exist in every single organization. Why? Well, because I have my phone. I bring my phone to work. My phone syncs my corporate email. Well, there's another vulnerability that I introduced that my company may or may not even have any control over. My laptop. Most of us think of our laptops as ours, even if they're company issued, right? The company has no real control over it. It's my laptop. I'm going to do with it what I will. Well, again, so that's another entry point the attacker has to break into the environment that the company can't necessarily secure. So that said, security personnel have to protect against millions of vulnerabilities, and an attacker only has to find one.
I would add there's several good gateway appliances out there as well that are particularly effective against phishing attacks and spear phishing attacks if they're configured correctly. I've worked several cases in the last 6 months where a phishing attack with something as simple as having the checkbox that says do the reverse DNS lookup would have prevented the attack completely. Because the attack appeared to be from the CEO and appeared to have something important from HR or an announcement letter, when in fact it was actually sent from a Hotmail server. So if the lookup had been done just in the basics of the email, it would have prevented that. So there are I think some technology solutions as well. But again, they have to be configured correctly, or they're just $50,000 door stop.
There's been a shift. There's been a shift in how people address like spear phishing and phishing attacks. Even with traditional like antivirus programs and scanning programs, a lot of times they used to do signature-based. They would try to find something that was a known entity. Now they do what's called behavioral scanning, and that's a really important advancement in terms of security, because instead of just looking for something that is an attack, you're looking for behaviors. And what happens at times is you end up pulling in more than the baseline of what really is an attack. But if you recognize the behaviors, and that's something that will be more effective. And I think when you do training, that's one of the things you want to do. You want to incorporate behaviors as part of your training program, so that people can spot things based on behavior signatures.
You have to look at social media as a highly dynamic and distributed channel for promoting a number of messages. It's a great place to be. It gives you tremendous reach to a group of folks that you might not otherwise be able to reach, because they don't communicate in that same place that you otherwise communicate. Right? We all use corporate email at some level, but that doesn't necessarily allow you to get out to the folks in this room. However, if I hit hashtag net diligence, those of you who are following the hashtag might get to know me a little bit better. So I say embrace it. But with that, I think there's a couple of caveats, and it's be vigilant, it's supervise it, and you've got to recognize that there are a whole host of areas that you have to really be concerned about. If you consider just some basic background, Twitter's got 200 million users plus, and 200 million daily tweets. So what that means is communication gets out there much more quickly than it ever did. I mean, we're in an information overload. But to the point about threats and hacks and brand infringement, we see it every day. I'll share a couple of stories along the way. But the first is, there's a whole freedom of speech. But for me to go out there and say I just went to a great restaurant last night, but I saw something on the floor. The minute I see that something on the floor, I might post a tweet about that restaurant, and it may be very real and it may be very damaging.